Hello, welcome back to Gemma Movie Recap. Today we will tell you the story of war film based from true event in First World War, entitled Osowiec, Attack of the Dead Men. There will be spoilers ahead. But before we start, please support our channel by subscribing and click the bell icon for future notifications. Now, let's start. The film opens in August of 1915. At the height of the First World War, a standoff exists between the Soviet Union and Germany. The Germans, who are continually being driven back, get ready to launch one more offensive against the Russians in an effort to expand their territory closer to the Communist core. Not long later, there is a hand-to-hand battle in which both sides lose exactly the same number of soldiers. The Russians defend their line, and after intense close-quarter fighting, the Germans make a tactical withdrawal. A young Russian officer called Olinsky is forced to return to the trenches as soon as the action ceases due to overwhelming German artillery wreaking havoc on the Russian lines and blasting nearly every square inch of the Soviet ground. A Red Cross truck arrives at the German side of the trench. A man named Hauser, the man driving the Red Cross truck, initially thinks that he is delivering medical supplies, but after grabbing something to eat, Hauser then discovers that he is actually delivering poisonous gas after one of the soldiers mishandles one of the canisters, causing alarm within the camp. Thinking that it is ironically inhumane despite the ongoing war, Hauser tries to warn and plead with the German commander that the use of poison gas would be dangerous for both parties, like it would be using a double-edged sword. But desperate for victory and hungry for glory, the German commander dismisses Hauser and plans to go ahead with the gas assault. Later that night, in an effort to collect the dead, a ceasefire was agreed upon. Germans were gathering their dead, and Hauser was a volunteer. Hauser finds an older Russian soldier who is still alive buried among the bodies while searching for bodies that he might be able to recover. Hauser, who is obviously opposed to the war, decides to ignore what he saw and act as though nothing happened. Hauser walks past a neighboring German soldier and carries on with his night. Olinsky learns that one of his dependable NCOs had returned alive the following day. Olinsky rushes to meet his colleague to see how he is doing as soon as he gets the good news. The Russian commander is overjoyed to find that his colleague is still breathing and appears to be in good condition. How the Russian survivor was able to crawl back to his section of the trench is described by him. The survivor also expressed gratitude to Olinsky for sparing his life during the previous day's skirmish. After a brief conversation, the Russian survivor informs Olinsky that he observed German soldiers wearing a mask, which can only denote the presence of poison gas. Olinsky, a notable alumnus of a Soviet military academy, is well versed in chemical warfare. Olinsky tells his soldiers to gather and delivers the dreadful news shortly after. Olinsky warns his men that there is a good chance they could die because the Germans plan to use poison gas the following day and they still have the duty to defend the line. The men then ask if there's any way of surviving the attack. Olinsky responds and orders his men to prepare wet rags and use them to cover their noses and mouth so that it could help with minimizing the poisonous gas getting in their system and hopefully survive the gas attack. The next day, as expected, the Germans releases the poison gas when the wind was favorable. Not soon after, mustard smoke covers the entire battlefield. As soon as the canister empties out, the German patiently waits until the smoke clears. As soon as the smoke clears, a full battalion of German troops starts slowly advancing toward the Russian positions. It is eerily quiet, and moments later, the Germans arrive on the other side and witness a morbid scene. As they reach the Russian side of the trench, the Germans see the hundreds of Russian defenders lying flat on their backs or flat on their stomachs, totally unconscious. Initially, they thought that the gas attack was a success, or so they thought. Not even the bird soaring up the skies survives the gas attack and fall down from the sky. but as one German removes his mask, thinking it is safe, he sees one Russian struggling to crawl up the small hill, and almost immediately, one by one, the Russian starts waking up despite having difficulty breathing. The Germans could not believe their eyes and were lost for words, as the Russians were supposed to have died, but miraculously, they survived. Not soon after, as soon as the Russians gain consciousness and recover from their nauseating state, they start shooting at the enemy, and the Germans start dropping to the ground like flies, causing the majority of the Germans to run between their tails. The film concludes with, in spite of several difficulties, the Russians were able to launch a counterattack and maintain their position in what is now known as the Attack of the Dead. However, when the circumstances changed 2 weeks later, the Soviet troops withdrew. No matter what, whenever they manned the region, no German army was able to beat them or force them to flee. I appreciate you coming. Subscribe to the channel to see more content like this.